Ranieri tries one!
Well, if you want to sign Eza or Rodrigo, you're going to have to get that wallet out and buy some more jerseys because there's no more money left at the club. This is not that kind of Gooner, an Arsenal podcast. And we are coming to you the day after Arsenal's 3-2 defeat at home against Villarreal and a collection of some of our worst ever signings. Two of them are actually, they're in the bracket. They're in the not that Gooner worst signing of all time bracket. And I mean Nicola Pepe and Denis Suarez. So we'll talk about the bracket. We'll get to that. And of course, we're going to chat about the result and some of the performances, some of the things that we noticed tactically, some of the frustrations that we have in terms of how we feel preseason is going and whether or not we think that has any bearing on the actual season, as well as some other things that have occurred in and around the league. So we'll touch on all of that. Lots happening. Hope everything's good with you guys, with the listeners. And yeah, just very, very, I feel exhausted already. Season hasn't even started and I feel exhausted.
This
anyway,
podcast has barely started and you're already exhausted. So what does that say?
I know,
also,
man.
I am
like,
sure.
The worst part is I'm almost done with my coffee.
Well, it's Starbucks. It's shit coffee. That's why it's not doing its job.
Yeah, I know.
This is no product promotion, by the way. I don't want to get us sued. You know, we're having a really good start here. So.
All I'll say is that I had already gone to my usual spot once today, and I ran out of coffee pots. Well, actually, I didn't run out of coffee pots. I ran out of milk, and I wasn't feeling like going to the store. So I just did the next easiest thing. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Drew, how are you doing?
Well, like we were talking about before we press record, I'm having one of those days where when you're in our rough age bracket and you have those moments where you're just like, when I was a teenager, why did I wish for adulthood? And I'm having one of those days. Like, I'm still currently working. It's 8:30. I haven't even eaten dinner yet. So I'm currently eating while we're doing this podcast. So I'm going to be muted a lot. I'm trying to collect all my thoughts to have an actual focused discussion with you about a match that, quite frankly, I don't care about. So it's a really interesting episode for me.
You are in the distinct minority in that regard, by the way.
It's preseason, man. I genuinely do not care nearly as much as the majority of the fans that I have seen, given some of the social media reactions that I saw yesterday. So Thankfully, I wasn't working for One Football that day, so I didn't have to collect myself on shift to be able to do my job without flipping a table about some of the people's reactions. But here we are. So.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm kind of in two minds right now after that match because on the one hand, right, I don't think we looked great. I don't think we've really looked great at all this preseason, and you're seeing some of the same negative themes with how we played last season, and so I think, as is the case with a lot of people, I have a little bit of PTSD from that. And I just, I think everyone's hoping to see something different. Everyone's hoping for change. But on the flip side, it's important to remember that change can take time. And we've made 6 signings. A couple of them have bedded in very quickly. And a couple of them are representative of changes away from our old style of playing from last season. And, like you said, it is preseason. And the thing about preseason is you don't know what the objective of your team is. You know what I mean? Like during the actual season, it's to get in there and get the win, right? And to put as many points on the board as possible, to go as far as they can in competitions, to score as many goals as they can, to concede as few as possible, right? During preseason, I don't think that's always That's always the top priority. You know what I mean? Like, of course, winning all your preseason games is nice, but I think we've said this a couple times in the pod already. The point of preseason is to get that fitness back up to a level where you're able to compete when the stakes are actually high, and to also work on some tactical things and learn about what your team can do and what they can't do. And I can't help but notice that I feel like Mikel Arteta's a very transparent person, and I don't mean to say that like he can't keep a secret, or he kind of vomits every waking thought he has into the microphone during pressers, but you can tell when Arteta is very unhappy with how a match went. And we lost to Spurs, we lost to Villarreal. Don't think we looked particularly great against Newcastle. And I can't recall a single moment this preseason where Arteta has had like a stone face, or thunderclouds brewing above his eyebrows or anything whenever he's been answering questions from reporters post match. So maybe this is about the fitness. Maybe this is maybe there's something that they're doing on the training ground that they're not going to do in the match because they don't want tape on how they want to set up at Old Trafford. Also, players are training after the Villarreal match. Apparently, they might have been training before as well, which might explain kind of some of the tiredness you could see in the performance. I mean, the point here, right, is that like it's so hard to extrapolate things from preseason matches, and that's why it's kind of a fool's errand at the end of the day. But there are things I think that are worth talking about, and maybe a few things that you can draw, maybe not big conclusions, but draw something out of. Do you think I'm off base with that, or what are your thoughts?
No, I don't think you. I mean, as someone who has been in coaching and youth development for, we do the math, 20, 21 years now, I can tell you that preseasons, the vast majority about preseason is making sure the new players that you have to work with are bedding in correctly, on the pitch, off the pitch, culture of the club, all those kind of things. And also, so much of it is about fitness as well, and also finding those levels that you think maybe players can hit both early, like where they're at when they come into camp. All these kind of things are really important. Yeah, you want to obviously instill tactical, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like make sure that framework is also being worked on in preseason, but the actual results themselves don't matter. Yeah, you can draw certain conclusions. I understand that there's obviously some PTSD from some fans out there about, not just the nature of the results, but like who they were against. But quite frankly, I don't care if we lose to Spurs in preseason. It means nothing to me. Do we beat them both times in the league a month from now or whatever? Yeah. That's when it matters. Do we see them in the cups? Do we beat them again? Yeah, that matters for right now. And that's also kind of why I'm annoyed that the club wanted to do a North London derby in preseason, because we all knew what the reaction was going to be if we didn't win. So that just annoys me by default. And I think something like that is a bit more sacred than to have it boiled down to a preseason fixture that's halfway across the world. And that doesn't mean I don't think foreign fans don't deserve or shouldn't be credited with or presented with the experience of seeing one live. I think that's amazing. I just feel like a North London derby should be kept as it is, like the prime thing where so much of your season usually hinges on it in various ways. It shouldn't be melted down to a pre-season friendly. That's kind of what I mean. Regardless of where it's held, it could have been held at the Emirates. I would have had the same opinions. It doesn't really matter about that. But no, I don't think that you're wrong in saying that you can have some concerns, right? But also, at the end of the day, it's still just preseason. We could literally lose every preseason fixture on the docket and still go on and win the league, because the results just don't matter. But all I would say now is the manager will have a really good baseline of where we're currently at, the things we absolutely do need to work on. He'll hopefully be sussing out the best team for match day one, all these kind of things. And there's still a lot to work, a lot of work to be done between that result and the first match day against United. So yeah, there's like anything with kind of how I engage on social media and on this podcast, at least the best that I can, is that you have to be like kind of measured as best possible. Yeah. There's still too much context, still too much nuance you can draw on. So where hopefully as a collective we can move away from some of the reactions. It seemed like today I was in a separate group chat and someone posted a screenshot from Twitter, and there was some sort of like live Twitter chat talking about how Berta's a fraud. Now she's like, you cannot be serious. Like already. You know what I mean? Like this is kind of what I'm talking about. Like this level of absolute like imbecility is the things that make me frustrated with the fandom.
I mean, that's not all that surprising because people were calling Berta a fraud before the window even started.
Which is crazy to me because you could look at his track record and know that just wasn't the case. And you can't expect directors of football to get it right every time, but I would argue that he probably has one of the better overall hit percentages for a track record for someone who is dealing with player acquisition and player sales. I think he's probably one of the top 5 in Europe over the last however many years, right, on average. So to call him a fraud is insane just from that alone, let alone how preseason's gone. Gyökeres has come in very, very cold. He didn't really have his own preseason from one team to another. We've not even seen, and we'll talk more about it, but we've seen nothing but patchwork 11s basically this entire preseason, right? We've not even seen what would realistically be our first 11 on match day one, provided who's fit and available, no injury, so it's just too many things to delve into it. And it I'm going to pull a Peter Griffin. It really grinds my gears that like this is where we're still at, and it's August 7th. So
yeah. I think this whole Berta is a fraud thing is, coming primarily from Gyökeres not scoring 18 goals in 80 minutes of play, and that's a little weird. And here's the thing, right? Let's kind of get into the match now. With Gyökeres, he started because, and I don't think he would have started if Havertz had been. It doesn't sound like he's unfit necessarily. Sounds like they were just maybe not taking any risks with him. But I think Havertz would have started otherwise. So Gyökeres started in his place, and what proceeded to unfold is kind of the thing that I've expected and been a little worried about. Not massively concerned at this point in time, but this is kind of the things I was worried about with Gyökeres, which is it's a very big change in how we normally play in order to facilitate him, right? And you saw it where Gyökeres spent basically the entire time he was on the pitch trying to make runs in behind Villarreal's defense, and he wasn't getting picked up, and he wasn't getting the ball passed to him as often as he'd like it to be. And people are talking about the Martinelli missed opportunity to pass to him. I don't think Martinelli was great at all, but I do think that is a bit of a harsh criticism for him. Just because he really would have had to thread the needle to make that pass happen. But I mean, I digress. So Gyökeres, didn't get that many chances. There was that one opportunity where I think Marino played the quick ball in. Saka was going to be running onto it, but Gyökeres beat him to it, swung his foot at it first time, forced to save. And yeah, like you said, like he was playing in front of a midfield of Norgard, Nwaneri, and Marino. Those guys aren't going to be starting with him week in, week out. And so I just think people maybe need to take a beat on the Gyökeres thing and just kind of remember that these guys are going to have to adjust to him. And also the guys who are going to be feeding him the ball, like Odegaard, right? Like they haven't really played that much with him so far. And I think another thing that I think is going to really play a huge role is Madueke from the left wing, I get this feeling that those two, Madueke and Gyökeres, are really going to match up nicely when played alongside each other. And I think Madueke is going to play some good balls in for him. They're gonna combine well on the left hand side. But you could even see it throughout the match where Gyökeres kind of started to realize, I can't just sit between the center backs here, right? I have to figure out ways to get on the ball, and he started drifting into the channels, primarily the left channel, right? And he started getting fed a little bit more. And, he pressed really well, I think, won the ball high up the pitch. Wasn't as selfish as I wanted him to be when that happened. But, yeah, I think it was okay. I just think people are kind of expecting Gyökeres to be a monster right off the bat. And then kind of in the backdrop, you have Ekitike at Liverpool, who's already had some really good moments. You have Isak possibly probably joining him. You have Šeško, who's just joined Manchester United, and now people are starting to have their second thoughts because that player has been hyped up ridiculously, and United fans are doing their celebration dance over it. So, I just kind of want to turn this over to you. What did you make of Gyökeres' performance? And I mean, do you find it more concerning, or did you think it was just a normal performance of a player who's adjusting to a brand new style of play?
No, I'm not concerned about it. I think when you buy players that are also prominent players who have been in the spotlight in some degree, you know what you're getting, right? We all know what Gyökeres is about, and he's very good at what he does. I think there's a bit of a maturation period between both the club and the player. Like, he has to tweak his game, and we also have to tweak our game for him. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that you can't. As managers, like in my perspective at least, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but from the way I view things, you can't always force players into what you want specifically, unless you buy players who always are the exact make and model of what you're looking for, right? I mean, again, Haaland is Erling Haaland, but Erling Haaland, when he was purchased, did not ideally suit Manchester City. He's just a very good player who, if you get him into space, he'll probably score, right? Which is why he scored 15 goals in his first 10 matches for City when he first arrived. But there was still questions surrounding if he was still a perfect fit for them, because despite him getting that rate of return, in the box, he was still kind of almost lost in the system in the beginning. Has he adapted now? Yeah, of course he has, right? And you can see it, how his game has evolved away from who he was when he was younger by 2 or 3 years. So I think when it comes to Gyökeres, I think people took the trope of he requires less development than Šeško, and I think that is true, but it doesn't mean that a player doesn't still have to adapt to the system. It just means that who he is as a player, he's probably not going to further develop beyond that, because very few players get better than what they are at 27 and 28. That's very, very rare. I think players like Jamie Vardy are one of the very few exceptions where he got better as he aged, right? But usually players, especially strikers, they're the best iteration of themselves in that window. 26 to 30 or whatever. So no, I don't think it was concerning from him. I think you saw the kind of runs he'll make, the kind of runs we need a center forward to make that we've lacked for a while. I think to a degree you could say that the players around him have to reacclimatize to having that pass as an option, that through ball as an option, that ball over top as an option. I think there's some conversation to be had about that. But also at the same time, when players reach a certain age, understanding of space in football is a very key concept in the sport, and you learn that when you're much younger. It should not take that much to ask a player to pick their head up and see a possible pass and attempt it. If you don't complete the pass, that's okay. But when you show your willingness to make that pass, it gives the defense something else to think about. Because if teams that are defending, that all they have to do is sit there, and you're not going to try to play a more risky pass because you're more risk averse. You're going to recycle possession, sit in that quote unquote horseshoe or whatever. It makes their life that much easier. When you give defenders further things to consider, not just the run, but when they start seeing you making those passes, all of a sudden it's okay. Well, we kind of have to throw our plan out the window in a way. So I think over time you'll see us just get better at it. And I agree with you when he's with that prime 11. There's better awareness on the ball and understanding of space when you have players like Rice, Odegaard, and Zubimendi over maybe say Marino, maybe say Nwaneri, who's still kind of trying to develop that side of his game, right? And Nørgaard still, I think Nørgaard's quality he's looked quite good this preseason, but he himself still is also acclimatizing to a new club, right? It's still a very new system than when he was at Brentford. So when you bring in quite a few players who have to adjust, there's a teething period. So I'm not worried about it. I think Gyökeres is going to be just fine. And I've said that when the links first surfaced. So if I get egg on my face, so be it. But yeah, I think we'll be okay. And again, I don't draw too many conclusions. It's just a matter of now Arteta has that framework to what he has to work out, and then we go from there. So
yeah, I think if there's anything that was concerning about Gyökeres' time on the pitch, it wasn't him per se. It was the fact that his teammates did not seem to understand how to play with him. And, you and I have talked about this a little bit. You and I were kind of both flinging in some frustrated messages on the day into the group text. But they just kept launching these aerial crosses into Villarreal's box. And, you're just saying they're just that the guy who's playing striker for you now is not a prolific header of the ball. Keep the ball low. Keep it on the ground. Yeah, I honestly that was really starting to piss me off by the time, kind of maybe the fourth or fifth time it happened. I was just saying they're just I know this is a preseason game, but just figure it out. Come on, guys. In addition to that, we also got our first look at Nani Madueke in Arsenal colors, and he came on at left wing. And I think there's been a bit of a debate as to where Madueke will play. And I think people are still kind of deliberately ignoring this, but Arteta came out and said after the match he's going to play on both sides. Obviously, he played on the left wing in this game, and people are still kind of treating him as one or the other when it's very clear that he's kind of a bit of both. But kind of with that aside, what did you make of Madueke's performance overall? And kind of with Martinelli looking the way he is, and with Trossard potentially leaving the club this summer, if we are to make another signing, do you think Madueke? I know this is a very limited, what's the word I'm looking for here? Sample size to go off of. So this isn't just based on the one appearance, but do you think Madueke could take over as the preeminent left wing starter this season?
I mean, I think we'll see Martinelli start against United match day 1 for 2 reasons. One, because Madueke won't be up to speed yet because he didn't really get a preseason at all, really.
Yeah.
He got Club World Cup, but he's not had time away to get that coming out period before he can come back in and start to get his fitness levels back up again. So I don't think he'll start match day 1. Certainly, he's not really had a lot of time with the team because of that. So I think Martinelli will start from the off, but I don't know how long that'll last. It really depends because all of our criticisms of Martinelli aren't about can he hit the ceiling we think he's capable of, because we've seen what he's capable of. It's a matter of this now consistent, topsy-turvy form. He's just not put in the type of performances week in, week out you would expect of someone who showed 3 seasons ago what he actually can do. That was almost kind of I don't know how to verbalize that without being probably podcast inappropriate. So we'll move on from that thought process real quick. But I do feel like Martinelli will be on a shorter leash, right? If we're talking about after 3, 4, 5 match days, if it's the same old frustration, and when Madueke does come on, if he shows a bit more, then you're starting to talk about, well, maybe Madueke will start there. I think it's good that we have him as an option, because now you're talking about a situation where if Saka picks up a little knock and he can't start one match day, if he needs rest, you can know that Madueke will start on the right? And now that Martinelli is under pressure because he exists in the team now. I also think he offers something a bit better where he's so good at taking his man on and at least try to drive into that space on the ball And Martinelli has, for some strange reason, he just seems he's lost confidence in his ability to do that. I think he's happy to run into space because he's still quite quick, right? You play Martinelli into space, he'll want to make that run. But his inconsistency in trying to beat his man and eliminate someone out of the defensive shape and then drive into the final third, that's like Madueke's bread and butter. He's one of the most direct players in the Premier League. And because he's left-footed, then you're looking at a scenario where if he beats the right back or whoever's in that space, and he obviously drives into the final third, you're looking at someone on a preferred foot that can play a ball across the face of the goal to whoever it is, whoever his Joker is. Maybe Saka at the back post. You got a late run in from Rice, or the guard on top of the box. That opens up a different tactical consideration that you don't have with Martinelli. So, yeah, it's going to have to be it's up to Martinelli to keep his place, because I think now, I don't want to bring this up, but like even though you have someone like Max Dowman who's coming on, and showing in small sample size that even he himself is being more effective in the final third than Martinelli is. And when that's the scenario, you kind of know that. And I wouldn't say Martinelli's time is up. I hate using that term, but he definitely has to prove consistency, or else we now have players it seems like Arteta would trust to put them in to replace him. And that's kind of exactly what you want in your squad in general. So, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I tweeted this thing. I really meant for it to be a joke, and a lot of people took it way more seriously than I thought they would. But I tweeted that Dowman had beaten his man more times in 1.5 than Martinelli had since February, and it's not true. But kind of the point does still stand. Where do you know where Martinelli currently is in terms of percentage or percentile for successful dribbles?
I do not. Off the top of my head, I do not. Okay, that's
12%. Yeah,
that's bad. Like that's
very bad.
Yeah,
88% of Europe, 88% of forwards in Europe are better at beating their man than Martinelli is. And that doesn't win you anything. That doesn't win you the Premier League or the Champions League. And then you looked at Madueke, and again, this is a guy who just came back from holiday, and this is a guy who, like you said, was playing almost every match of the Club World Cup, and had a very long season before that. But he was still getting past his man at a pretty solid rate. Played in like some very threatening crosses while he was on the pitch. And he was only on the pitch for 10, 15 minutes maybe? Yeah, just already you see that directness and that confidence and that willingness to take on your man and you risk losing the ball. And if you lose the ball, you'll try it again, right? And you'll go over and over and over. And, this isn't to hate on Martinelli or anything, but it's just, this is elite football, where if you are not doing the job, people are going to come take your place eventually. And so you see it with Madueke, you see it with us still looking at players like Eza and Rodrigo. You see it with Max Dowman coming in and being our best player in preseason. And, just getting past players on a regular basis at the age of 15, right? This guy is 8 years younger than Martinelli is, and he's already showing more efficacy at the one-on-one game. So, if I was Martinelli, I would be worried. And Sami Mukbel was on Latte Firm earlier today, basically saying that Arsenal didn't want to sell Martinelli this season because his value had dropped so much, and they were hoping that he would have a good 25-26 season, and then they could revisit the idea of selling him in the summer. That's where he is right now, according to one of the most reliable journalists in the game these days. So, I am very worried about Martinelli. I do think Madueke is going to overtake him pretty quickly, honestly. And yeah, I mean, there will be more Max Dowman's. I mean, there might not be anyone as good as he is for quite some time, but there will be more players coming out of Hale End or being signed to the club who are desperate to take that shirt off your back and take your place in the starting lineup. And Martinelli just doesn't seem to have responded to that. On the subject of Max Dowman, do you have any worries stemming from, and let me know if you disagree with the statement, stemming from him being maybe our best player this preseason? And do you think he's going to, be a regular player in this team, or at least regularly make match day squads?
It's tricky because you have to consider that he's 15 years old, right? Yeah. He turned 16 in December. That's the first thing. I think it's clear. I think the argument can be made and should be made, and I think it's pretty cemented that he's arguably one of the best 15-year-olds in Europe. I don't think that's a weird thing to say. But at the same time, and I've said this elsewhere, like when you're that young, there's no guarantee that you haven't peaked early. Sometimes athletes do peak early. They peak when they're 17, 18, and you're never going to get a better version of them, which is why sometimes they look so good at even more prominent youth setups than we have. And then all of a sudden they spike, they hit a wall, they can't get past that wall, and then a year or two later they're sold for a fraction of what you thought that player was going to become. We've seen that time and time again. Bojan Krkić is a prime example of that at Barca. People were talking about him like he was a future Ballon d'Or winner. He ended up at Stoke. So I think that's a prime. And you've got multiple players that happened with from Barca. And that's not me slating La Masia, but if players like that can flop at La Masia and all of a sudden not kick on to the next level, what does that mean? Ansu Fati is another one. He was Lamine Yamal before Lamine Yamal, and I think his story wasn't as much of a what if scenario as Krkić, but he went from potential Barca star to being loaned out to Brighton, and then being loaned out to Brighton and not doing anything while at Brighton, and that's a huge drop in levels, just in club stature. Not that the Premier League's a drop from La Liga, but to go from Barca to Brighton and then not even make it to Brighton, and now he's off on loan to Monaco. Those things can happen. So that's why I'm cautious with Dowman. I see a player at his age that's phenomenal for his age group. No one can speak against that. Even me, with my often reserved kind of nature, it's clear how good he is. It's clear that he is also not just comfortable, but confident playing against grown men, seasoned professionals, albeit preseason, sure, but he doesn't look out of step despite the age difference. He looks like he understands not just the task on his plate, but he understands those who are around him in the team. So that tells me he's acclimatized well to the senior environment, which is really important. I do think there's a scenario in my head. What I would personally do, I would keep him in and around the senior team all season. I would start him in the domestic cups, particularly early on, particularly if we get, a smaller side, and that's not disrespect, but that's prime time for him to get some good senior minutes under his belt. If you get, I don't know, say even if we like draw Sunderland in the Leeds in like the FA Cup second or third round or whatever, I would start him and then see how it goes. I would not play him in Champions League at all. I would even struggle to start him in the Premier League. I think there will be instances where, depending on fitness and availability and how the season goes, that we could maybe see him on the bench for a Premier League match. I don't know if Arteta would bring him on, but I also think the way Arteta has spoken about him, it also wouldn't surprise me if he did bring him on as a sub for the last 10 to 15 minutes. And it's not that, some online fans are going to say, it's Arteta's ego, so he could say he just brought on another youngster. No, it's, Dowman is an exceptionally talented player for his age. But I also know that Arteta won't rush him into the limelight if he doesn't have to. So it's very key that we handle his development appropriately.
You don't get it, Drew. The deep Arteta state at Arsenal don't want their transfer ID to be undermined by a kid from Hale End. So they're going to keep him down because he'll expose them as frauds if he ever gets on the pitch.
This is like Joe Rogan territory. Can we please move away from this expeditiously? I can't be involved in that. So I'm not having it. Not with us, Shem. But no, but at the end of the day, I feel like he's going to slowly acclimatize to the senior setup this season, and then next season, beyond that, I think he'll be in the senior side regularly. I don't mean it's necessarily starting, but I think he'll be in the matchday squad almost every week. And there's window to understand that maybe that's not that too far-fetched because we don't know. Like, just for example, and I even hate myself for saying this, but what happens if Ødegaard has another really down season? Right. Like, what happens if, Dowman continues to develop and Martinelli ends up getting sold? There's another pathway for him to be, to get senior minutes as well. Like, I think we're in a position now where the squad makeup and the age range of our squad, there's a window for Dowman to come in within the next 12 to 24 months and pull like on Nwaneri. I don't think that's unrealistic to say, but I do think you can try to do that too early and it'd be detrimental if it doesn't pan out. So timing is key. The steady uptick in exposure and minutes is also key, which is why I think, getting him minutes in the domestic cups, thankfully we have two. Getting him minutes in the domestic cups, I think, is invaluable. It'll be excellent exposure for him.
Yeah.
But if his development goes the way it goes, we might be having a very different conversation this time next year. So, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think the Champions League makes sense because you even saw with Lewis Skelly and Nwaneri where they were good enough to play, probably, or at least good enough to get a few minutes here and there, especially in the dead rubbers in the group stage. But Arteta, that first year, when they were like 15, 16, Arteta didn't really give them any minutes in the Champions League. He had them in and around the matchday squad, but if I remember correctly, they didn't really get minutes. So I think it makes sense to do that with Dowman as well, because the Champions League is a whole other beast. That being said, I agree that he's going to play as often as possible in the domestic cups. I also think he's a couple injuries away from being a very heavily relied upon player in the Premier League now. Like if Saka and Martinelli both get injured, I think you're going to see Dowman at right wing and Madueke at left wing if we don't bring in anyone else, right? If Ødegaard and Nwaneri get injured, I don't think Arteta's going to try to get creative with like Havertz or Marino or Rice at right center mid. I think he's going to play Zubimendi Rice, and then he's going to put Dowman in next to them. You know what I mean? So I think he's right there in terms of involvement in the squad. It's just that obviously there's a couple senior players ahead of him, and sorry, for some reason someone's racing on the road just outside. But yeah, I don't think he's going to get handed the keys immediately this season, but he looks like a player who's good enough that he's not going to be kept down for all that long.
Yeah, maybe so. I think that's a really good point because there are very few players who could come in and offer you the same type of profile that Dowman can if we're missing one of the key creators in chief, so to speak. Yeah, I think there's a conversation about if Saka, let's just say God forbid, I don't even want to put this into use,
knocking on wood right now.
Yeah, quite literally on my desk. If both Saka and Ødegaard went down injured for a prolonged period of time, I do think you'll see Dowman in the Premier League. I think you might even see him start, depending who the opponent is, because who else in the senior squad could best try to emulate those two players, right? You'd have Madueke on right wing, right? Maybe Nwaneri in place of Ødegaard. But I think it's a bit interesting because I've seen some fans speculate. I don't know which side of the line I fall on, but you have some fans speculate that they think Dowman's ahead of Nwaneri in terms of his development. I don't know if that's necessarily. I don't know if I believe that or not. I think that's a bit of a stretch because, again, fans always like to find the best new shiny toy and then ramp it up times 100. So, but at the flip side, they're also two very different players in my estimation. So, yeah, I do think if we had a very similar injury crisis this coming season to last season, I don't think it's weird to say that Arteta might trust Dowman in the Premier League. Maybe depending on the opponent. Maybe you'd even find a scenario where, let's just say we lost Odegaard, and I don't know, maybe we would then start Havertz and Gyökeres in the front two, and then sit with Rice with Zubimendi in midfield, and then you have two wingers on either side. We could maybe even see that. I don't think that's out of the realm of impossibility because we know for a fact that Havertz, to his core, isn't a center forward, but we also know Gyökeres is very good at playing with someone alongside him. He does for Sweden with Isak. And he looks quite good in that system. The system is different, but he can coexist with another forward in the forward line and still perform quite well. So I think that's kind of why I'm appreciative of kind of the way we built out the squad now, because there's other options we can consider without trying to shoehorn people into something maybe they're not ideally suited to. So I think there's a conversation around that. I still think we shouldn't force the Dowman conversation before he forces us to. You see what I'm saying? Like, when it becomes so undeniable that he should be starting in the Premier League, that's when you should start him in the Premier League. Until then, give him the cups, keep exposing him to the senior side as I think he'll be, again, training with the senior team all season long. I think he'll probably come in and out. He'll probably still get minutes with the under-21s, and then we'll bring him in maybe, for the domestic cups or whatever. But sometimes players become undeniable, and then you play them, which is what happened with Lamine Yamal. And I hate making that comparison because fans were already saying that Dowman's the answer to Lamine Yamal, which is insane. But that's the overall player development aspect is age doesn't matter if a player is good enough to be able to survive in that environment. And if once he proves that, like, unequivocally, that's a different conversation. Until that's unequivocally proven, and you need more than just 3 preseason matches to prove that, then you can have that. Then you can revisit it. So until then, who knows what'll happen? But I see your logic behind it for sure.
Yeah, and I think with the Nwaneri thing, I wouldn't say he's ahead of Nwaneri in development right now. What I would say is that Nwaneri now has a very big reason to make sure that he ups his game to the next level over the course of this season. Because if he doesn't, he now has someone right behind him breathing down his neck who could pip him in that pecking order at the rate that they're progressing in their own development right now. But I don't think we're there yet. I'm not going to sit here and say I'd take Dowman over Nwaneri, right? Yeah, I with everything I've said taken into account, I do want to stress that this kid's 15 years old. Like you said, Drew, development is not linear. He's not going to keep getting better at this same rate. We might not see him again this whole season. And, a lot of people, if that happened, right, would start saying, why is Arteta not starting him? The deep Arteta state didn't succeed as a young 15-year-old, and now he's taking it out on this 15-year-old, whatever people want to come up with. But I do want to stress Arteta's going to see this guy in training against his players, against his, senior first team guys every single day, or, every single day that Dowman is allowed to train with the first team. And so things can happen behind the scenes that cause the manager and other people to make decisions that we might not agree with. So, like, what I'm trying to say here is Dowman might suddenly drop off in training, and suddenly he's getting bullied and pushed around, by guys like Rice and Zubimendi and whoever, and Gabriel and whoever he comes up against. And Arteta might decide that he's not ready, right? That's perfectly possible. Or he could show up to training and just brutalize everybody for weeks on end until Arteta kind of draws the conclusion that Max Dowman might be the best player at the club, right? Those are both in the range of outcomes. I think we're probably going to end up somewhere in the middle where Dowman's very, very, very good and will earn a good number of minutes this season, but that's about the extent of it, and we're going to ease him in, and we're not going to, put the fate of the club on his shoulders like Barcelona have with Lamine Yamal.
Yeah, I was about to say, please consult your therapist about your level of black and white thinking, because that was a massive jump between those two scenarios, like with what can happen with Dowman. And
those aren't the only two possible.
No, those are very extremes, the hyper extremes. I feel like, but yeah, I feel like we'll probably end up somewhere in that middle ground. It's also really important that I say that from now on social media, you really have to refer to these people as the Arteta deep state, like ad nauseum. That's got to be coined.
I might, man.
Starting tomorrow, starting tonight, even maybe. But I'm kind of with you overall about same thing, like making sure we're measured about what you can really expect from a 15-year-old, because you can count on one hand the amount of times a 15-year-old has broken into a senior team and become like the best player on the planet. The answer is it's never happened at that age. Yeah, like 17-year-old, 18 years old, 19. Yeah, 15 is, you're looking at a player at that point who would have the potential to become one of the best players in the history of the sport. If you're that young, coming in to a club that's a top 10 club on the planet, and then commanding a first team place, like it's literally never happened.
That guy's got potentially a quarter of a century ahead of him in terms of his career. So like, there's so much time. I just think about, guys like Raheem Sterling and even to an extent Bukayo Saka. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's physically washed, like a lot of people are saying. Like, I think he looks fine, but like, I do worry about Saka, and you do see it with guys like Sterling, where they are used like a bar of soap until there is nothing left, just like Pop said, right? And they just run out of gas, or in their late 20s, just because the moment that they looked usable as teenagers, they were thrown into extremely demanding, high level, physically intense Premier League and Champions League football. And, you only have so much of that in your legs. So if we're going to use Max Dowman in those competitions, in those situations, I think the club have a duty not only to protect his career and ensure that there's some longevity to it, but also to make sure that they are using, or that they are getting the most out of Dowman that they can, right? Like, why use him now at 15 if he might be somehow twice as good in a couple years? You know what I mean? So like, I just think it's so important not to get overly excited about this thing. Like, obviously be excited, like that he's fucking incredible for his age, but like, I just think, I hate to be this guy who's like, oh, well, if the club know better than you, like, why are you, these are professionals we're talking. I don't want to be that guy, but like, they do know better. You have guys who've been around the game, who've been around youth development, who understand how the human body of athletes, matures and develops over time. So, these guys are going to be making decisions based on, decades of expertise. And it might be the wrong decision. It probably will be the right decision. And so I just kind of want to urge calm and caution, and, no Arteta deep state fits if Dowman just isn't the factor this season that you wanted him to be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's a really good shot about, the physiological side of the game, because, Lamine Yamal has already changed in front of our eyes in 12 months. From a physiological standpoint, he's taller. His frame is slightly shifted. And when people forget that when you grow, how you adjust to your the way you've changed from physical standpoint, sometimes it can change your actual game.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of things to consider. I don't want to dwell too much on it moving forward again for the rest of the show, but yeah.
Not to mention that, mentally and emotionally speaking, Lamine Yamal is now hiring little people for his birthday party and dating women twice his age. So,
Thank you for saying it because I didn't want to. So
I look to each their own. And if it's all consensual and everyone's fine with it, then fine. But I do think there's also something to be said about throwing teenagers into that level of limelight.
There is
so early. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my brother. Well, no, it's my brother who was like heavily recruited to play D1 basketball and went on to play college ball. He was saying how when he was like 17, they would go to tournaments like in Vegas, for example, and they would end up in like hot tubs with people who were definitely overaged. They were not. You start throwing around money around teenagers. This is why a lot of athletes sometimes make wrong choices. That's very common in professional sports. We see it all the time here in the U.S. How many times do we see, players go into the NFL at 19, MLB at 20, the NHL at 19, whatever. A lot of them come out on the right side, but a lot of them also come out on the wrong side. So, yeah, there's so much about player development that isn't just about, is this player good at kicking and dribbling a football? And that's kind of why, and I got into a discussion the other day with one of my friends, and I was talking about how one of the things I loved about Arsene Wenger and I love about Arteta is he tries his best to understand each of his players, who they are as people, like what you're working with mentally and emotionally. That's important when it comes to player development, especially when you're younger, because who a player is mentally and emotionally at 15, then you're different when you're 18, when you're 19. And we saw it with Lamine Yamal in front of our eyes, again, like you say. So who would have expected this would have been the talking point surrounding him 12 months ago? Like he's having his own kind of like rendition of Wolf of Wall Street, with so that's kind of like almost a bit mind blowing as well. So there's just so many factors at play. So I just kind of feel like, again, like I urge everyone to like just be cautious, be excited because of what he could become, 100%, 1,000% even. But leave it there and draw a fine line, or rather a large line rather, between what we hope he becomes and what he is now, and then just take it one step at a time.
I'll put it like this. I think we have enough to win the league without Dowman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no need to put all our hopes and dreams on him.
Agreed.
But yeah. Kind of aside from all that, I did want to just kind of pick your brain about the defensive side of the game, because Villarreal really ran right through us on the counter a few times. And, defense has kind of been our bread and butter for the last few seasons, right? That's kind of what has been the foundation of this Arteta era, a strong defense. And, every summer we're signing new defenders. This time around, we brought in Mosquera. Last season was Calafiori, and Lewis Skelly was introduced into the squad as well. So, like, it was kind of jarring to see how easily we were cut open by Villarreal. Do you put that down to us being worse defensively for whatever reason? Or do you think there's maybe another explanation for it that doesn't cause as much concern for you?
No, I don't think we're worse for it. I think it's just preseason. When you're shipped of, Gabriel didn't play, obviously. I think that's a large part of it as well. And you could probably argue that, part of that question is the midfield, because I think while I rate Nørgaard quite highly, and I do like Moreno overall, you're asking to, I would say, like, you have a very immobile Mikel Merino next to Nørgaard, who is somewhat similar to Jorginho. I don't think he relies on his pace, of course. I think he relies on his understanding of space to be where he needs to be on time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have two midfielders that way, I think then it becomes a bit of a detriment, obviously. And of course, you have Lunari also, who started the match in midfield, who, all credit to him for the progress he's shown, but it's also not Odegaard. It's not Rice or whatever. And I think when you consider all three of them are in the same midfield at the same time, at least to start the match, I think that kind of answers the question, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. Again, there are very few things about this preseason that have overly concerned me across the board. I'm not concerned at all. We might not even look a great match day one if we still got to win. I genuinely couldn't care, because the whole thing for me now is just incrementally get better from here on out every weekend until you hit across the first month of the season. So then you can really guarantee results moving forward. I think that's all that matters to me, and I'm fine with that. So yeah.
So with the defense, right? I'm not worried about it per se, because like you said, I mean, Gabriel just came back in that match, and you definitely don't want him sprinting down the pitch after Pepe or whoever at full speed. I think Kivior showed kind of some of the flaws that we've been aware of in his game, kind of in terms of his box dominance whenever he's defending. I thought he was very lackadaisical in terms of handling kind of threats in the box for a couple of Villarreal's goals. But and also I don't think Lewis Skelly has had the best preseason. I think he's kind of been sloppy passing wise, and just he's got caught out a couple times. But yeah, kind of my main point here is I haven't seen anything in our defending that I think is going to be a systematic change this season from what we've seen before. But I guess that kind of does bring me to kind of like this overarching worry I've had, which is, will we be ready for this season? Because yeah, we're not going to start match week 1 in mid-season form or mid-season shape. That's just not how it works. But our first 6 games are United away, Leeds home, Liverpool away, I think Forest home, City home, Newcastle away. That's a brutal run. And we're going up against the two teams that we're probably going to be competing for the title against. And I just, they're not going to be at in prime condition either, probably, when we face them, which I guess is one benefit of when we do play them. But if you lose to City or Liverpool in these first 6 weeks of the season, you're now playing catch up. And we've seen with Liverpool twice now. If they get a lead at the top of the table, they will hold on to it. City, kind of same deal. City are good at kind of clawing their way back in, and they're good at staying at the top of the table. My point is, while I do accept that we're not going to be at our best, I still think we have to be really damn good from minute 1. And if we get to Old Trafford and we're not putting away clean-cut chances, or we're not creating enough shots on goal for Gyökeres, and Mbumo or Cunha or now Šeško hit us on the break, there's going to be an uproar among the fan base. But more importantly, I think we're already going to be on the back foot against Liverpool and City. So that's just kind of the worry that I have. And I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're screwed this season and, it's top 4 that we're aiming for and all that. I'm just saying the margins are probably thinner than they've ever been for us. And I'm just not sure that we're going to be firing on all cylinders from minute 1 like I think we need to be.
I think that's a fair concern. I don't ever really consider you to be. I think you've had one alarmist moment that I can recall the entire time I've known you. So
just the one
that I've seen. Maybe you're hiding it quite well, And I also don't spend a ton of time on Twitter usually, so yeah, it's probably going amiss. But yeah, I don't think you're being alarmist here. I do think it's fair to say that because of, you could argue this Premier League season, at least on paper, is going to be even more competitive than the last season. I think that's not unfair to at least suggest. A lot of fans are saying that Chelsea might be closing the gap, to the top three. And credit to them, they've looked steadily improved under Maresca, so I don't think we could discount that. Really, people expect Liverpool to be better, given some of the talent that they've brought in, and if they get Isak, I genuinely understand the concern for that as well. We don't know what City are going to do, but you have to expect that, like someone said on, I forget where, I don't remember where I saw it, but someone said, the one really like poor season that Guardiola's had ever since he like finally got his hooks properly into City does not mean that people should discount them. They're going to be right back in the title race next season, and they've also acquired some excellent players. Reinders is a phenomenal midfielder. Cherky for despite his interesting personality quirks, he's an exceptionally gifted footballer. He's Erling Haaland is still there, of course. These kind of things. So yeah, I feel like the race in the top four. Plus, you have Newcastle. Who knows how they'll operate if they don't hold on to Isak? But I still think those four clubs, and then you can say, even if United don't finish 15th or 16th, it wouldn't be a shock to suggest that they could still considerably improve and end up in like a top 8 scenario. And United finishing 8th compared to United finishing 15th is a marked improvement. And then you have to based off of that knowledge, you then have to say playing them this season is going to be that much more difficult, obviously, because they're going to be a better team. They might not be prime United, but they're still going to be a much tougher customer to negotiate with. So, yeah, I think that there's got to be a requisite standard we come into the season with. I'm not saying we should play poor for match day one and just and hope to God we get a result. We do have to be at a certain level, I think, especially away from home, because Old Trafford's such a pain in the ass to go to, of course. But it doesn't have to be perfect for match day one, because rarely is it ever perfect for any club on match day one. It's rare to look, your best version of yourself from minute one in the season. I would say it's probably more rare than the inverse of that. So, but I also agree with you there with, if you come up poor against United, maybe you got a draw, and then maybe some fans are kind of mumbling, they watched us go bag a brace or whatever the hell. And then you got your next match. So, yeah, I do feel like, again, there's got to be like a balance where I don't expect us to be perfect, but I am with you as to where I want to see a marked improvement between now and, the following weekend. So, yeah.
That's the other thing, right? I think the mood around the club is a lot more fragile than it has been in previous seasons. And I think if we have a tough start to this season, I'm personally hoping for 12 points from our opening games, maybe like 13. I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and what I said was I want to beat United, Leeds, Forest. I can give or take whatever happens at Newcastle. Obviously, I'd prefer to win there as well. Whatever happens, don't lose to Liverpool and City. And I think I can live with how those first 6 games go. Well, not I think I can live. That would be a great way to get out of those first 6 games, right? Those 4 wins or 3 draws against teams we should be beating, and 3 draws against Newcastle and our title rivals, right? That would be excellent in my mind. I think if we lose one of those 6 games, there will be a full-scale meltdown, because I think people are just waiting for the wheels to come off this whole thing. And, it feels like a lot of people have really kind of drawn a line in the sand and said, this is the season where Arteta needs to deliver or I want him gone. And I kind of, before we kind of end with just a quick review of kind of the bracket, the the round of 32 there. What I even hate to ask this question, but I do think it is kind of an interesting baseline to set. What has to happen for you to kind of lose faith in Arteta in terms of his ability to, take this project to fruition?
I mean, if you hated to ask the question, you shouldn't have asked it. So that's the first thing. How dare you? No, I would probably say it's so hard because I think there are very few clubs on the planet, regardless of league, regardless of continent, that fans could realistically say they expect and demand you win the league this season. And I think you can probably name those clubs on one hand. I think Bayern is one, PSG, Barca, Real Madrid, right? Those two clubs habitually will say, it's win the league or a bust, right?
Yeah,
and then,
or at least Champions League.
Yeah, one of those two. And I genuinely think, maybe I would probably say that's probably about it.
Yeah.
Because Serie A is too close for an Inter fan to say they demand the Scudetto this season. I think the goal for the club is to win it, but I don't think fans can demand it, right? Because there's too many. The parity there is too close. Same thing with Portugal. Obviously, Benfica, Sporting, and Porto want to win the league, but there's no guarantee they will. Oh, I'm sorry. You could probably say Ajax is the fifth, or at least historically Ajax would be the fifth.
We'll stick to top six leagues.
Fair enough. So yeah, in the top six leagues, I think that's it. I don't think City, United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal fans can, at this point in time, can say that they demand a league win, and if they don't win the league, you should be sacking the manager. I think it's the Premier League is such another animal now, and the gap between I don't think there's one club that could just sit there and say it's ours to lose every season. I think you probably could say that about City, but I don't think you can now. So I think it's those four clubs. I think it's those four clubs that we finaled off. Maybe you have a different opinion of that, but for me, what I want to see from this season is I do kind of want to see silverware. I'd even be happy with another FA Cup because I think people dismiss the FA Cup too much. It's a difficult trophy to win, first and foremost. It's got a ton of prestige attached with it still. I think if we were to finish like second, win an FA Cup, make another deep run to the Champions League, I don't think that's a bad season. I think it gives you a good piece of silverware as well. I think realistically, of course, I want to win the Premier League this season. I wanted to win the Premier League last season. I do think we can expect the club to make semifinals of the Champions League again. I think that might be a stretch. Another deep run Champions League is going to be difficult. But I do think we should remain competitive in hopes that we get a top 8 spot and take it from there. What I would say was if we won the FA Cup but finished 6th, then you have to ask why did we fall that far away in the league and should we be worried? I think that would be a different conversation, right? I think unfortunately the litmus test now moving forward is league performance. There's too many variables in Champions League to really go by. Bigger clubs than us have had absolute disaster campaigns in Champions League and managers still have their jobs. So I don't think that's fair. But year in, year out, the one key performance metric for me is the league. So if we went from being so close to finishing runner-up 3 consecutive seasons, and all of a sudden this season we dropped to 6th, and we were off the pace by 25 points or whatever it would be, then you can say this is actually a massive warning bell. And do we need to start to consider things? I don't think that would be unrealistic to say. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there that I really feel strongly, which is I don't think people can sit there and demand the Premier League or the Champions League anymore and say if you don't win it, that's it, we're done. Right? You're looking at Liverpool, who are wheeling and dealing, maybe in ways that are unsavory. I don't think it's advisable to talk about that in detail at this point in time, but They're making friends with the PIF reportedly, and they're spending, maybe over £500 million by the end of this summer, right? Obviously, they're making a lot of that back in sales, but you kind of get the point in terms of like just the amount of players that they're bringing in. They're going to sign, not gonna, but they look likely to sign the best striker in the Premier League, right? So you've got that in Liverpool, and you've got a team that just won the Premier League. They know how to do it. You've got that in City, where you have a bunch of players who've won it several times. They've reloaded. Guardiola is divorced and angry. They are ready to go, right? Chelsea.
Wow, shots fired, but all right, I'm here for it. Fair enough.
Guardiola is a competitor. He is gonna, as soon as I saw that headline, I was like, we might be fucked the next season.
I mean, yeah, because competitors will channel whatever they need to go out and win something. So yeah, I mean, jokes aside, yeah, I think that's you never know. So
also, that man had a family to go home to, and now he's got even more time on his hands to just devote.
I refuse to laugh at that. I'm going to go back to mute myself, so I can't even.
That guy is going to be at the lab 24/7 this season. Yeah, people aren't talking about City enough. Anyway, so you have those two. You have Chelsea threatening to take that step up, right? As much as people want to, poo-poo the Club World Cup win. I'm not saying it's like akin to like the Premier League win or Champions League win, but like they beat the teams in front of them. That I can say. It wasn't the most grueling run, but they did it. And they have a really, really talented collection of players. They have a good manager. They could surprise us. United, they're better. Spurs, they're better. I don't think any of them are really going to figure into a top 4 or title race. But I mean,
James Maddison is now out for most of the season, so they took a massive hit to whatever chances they had or delusions they had of like fighting for top 4. Harry Kane obviously isn't going to just magically come back to the club. Son is now gone officially to LAFC. So I think Thomas Frank has a really interesting transition period ahead of himself. So I don't factor Spurs just yet. I think I factor United in way more than Spurs at this point. Although I rate Frank as a manager ahead of Amorim because you've seen how consistent Frank turned Brentford on a shoestring budget into a consistent competitor and a side that often gazumped teams much bigger than they are, right? So he himself is a good manager. So maybe he'll surprise us all just in terms of how good of a manager he is. But I don't factor Spurs in just yet. So
I think Spurs will be firmly mid-table, and then United I think are right there for now in terms of like where Spurs are. I think United are probably looking at like a top 8 finish. If they do somehow manage to get Baleba, they'll be interesting.
Yeah.
They
still can't defend for anything though. So
yeah. And then in the Champions League, I mean, PSG, Bayern, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Inter, the rest, right? So my point is that like it's really fucking hard to win the Premier League and the Champions League. And so I really resent, and I try not to like get on people about opinions all that often. At least like, nothing that's ridiculously crazy. But like, I really resent it when people are like, "Oh, if Arteta doesn't win the Premier League this season, like I think I want him gone." Like, dude, like we are up against a lot, right? So, I understand wanting to win something. I want to win something, but it is so hard. You need things to go right for you over the course of a 38 game season. You need things to go wrong a little bit for your competitors over the course of that season. So we'll see. I like, for me, if we are 15 points ahead of the top of the table in March and we blow that, something needs to change, right? If we don't finish top 3, I have big concerns. Maybe we need to have a conversation. But, if Liverpool sign Isak and they score 117 goals in the Premier League alone, or if Ryan Cherki has a 25-yard screamer in the top corner of the net every other week, like at the end of the day, you just have to do the best that you can do, and see where the chips fall. So
Yeah, I think, but that's the nature. That's the nature of any competitive sport at the professional level. Like, yeah, what you can control, not you not only should aim to do it, you should guarantee that you can, right? And then at that point, unfortunately, with sports, you do need some luck, and we've all said it before, and I don't think it's an excuse, but Liverpool got lucky about the fact that not that they didn't play well last season. I don't want to take anything away from them. I think they did play quite well across the entirety of last season. You cannot say that they didn't, or else they wouldn't have won the league, right? However, their job was made slightly easier because City had their biggest down season in I don't know 5 years, and half our team decided to get injured in the same season. So like if those two factors did not occur, you could make the argument that we don't know if Liverpool would have won the league at all. Right. So I do think they controlled what they could, which is their level of performance, and they got that the chips to fall in terms of what us and City went through. And I think that's just the nature of it. So I'm with you. I feel like, we control the variables that we can control. And you have to hope for the best. And I also want to touch on something where I think it's fair to say you can dissent fans from making nonsense claims, because how can fans demand we win the Champions League when we've literally never won the Champions League? That's ridiculous.
It's a good point.
Right. And the Champions League also now is harder to win than it used to be, in my estimation, because I think the quality across the board in football, I think, is much better than it was maybe, say, 20 years ago. Broadly, right? You've got smaller clubs now able to do things that they couldn't have done before. Yes, and that doesn't even remove the fact of what the big clubs can do now. So, yeah, I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Not to mention, right, if we're talking about competing against, clubs in the Premier League that are owned by nation states and or are friendly with nation states or engage in the multi-club model, I've got news for you. There's 4 or 5 more of those in the Champions League, right?
Yeah.
Real Madrid and Barcelona basically, have they will never get in trouble for overspending.
No, because it's within football's interest to make sure nothing ever happens to Real Madrid and Barcelona, and that's just the nature of it. Because they have such a domestic, continental, and global pull and appeal that it's similar to, and I hate to say, but it's similar to when Bayern bailed out Dortmund financially. It was in Germany's best interest to make sure that Dortmund did not completely collapse, and unfortunately, one of the things that's harmed German football over the years is the fact that some of the other big clubs did not get the same treatment. Schalke being in Bundesliga 5 is insane because they're domestically, Schalke is a top 4 club in Germany. They're huge. Hamburg, same thing. Hamburg are massive in Germany. They've been languishing in second division for the longest time, and now they're finally back in Bundesliga, and that's huge for them. But it is detrimental to leagues when bad things happen. It's the same reason why so many people were hoping that Lyon did not get hit with that massive relegation and to the point where who knows what happened to the club, because Lyon are huge domestically. They're also pretty big across Europe. So, yeah, I think you can make that argument about, the powers that be will never allow clubs of such long-term standing like Real Madrid and Barcelona. Nothing will ever happen to them. I agree with that. So it's just what it is. I think, I'm not to interrupt you, but yeah, I think overall it's the task at hand for Arteta is absolutely gargantuan. And yes, we shouldn't make excuses for him, because for me, the metric that I judge Arteta by is how are we performing. I don't care what Liverpool are doing. I don't care what City are doing. I don't care what Chelsea are doing, United, whoever. How do we look? How do we look on the pitch? What results are we getting? Who's performing? What are the decisions that he's making or refuses to make that I may not agree with? That's the lens I've always had. So when fans get annoyed about who City are buying and who we didn't buy, or who Liverpool are buying and why we didn't buy them, I genuinely don't give a shit. Like, how is Arteta building this project out? Is it doing it to the best of his ability? Did it peak and are we about to hit a valley? And do we need a change? Like, those are my talking points year on year, multiple times a season. I think that's all we really can do. And if it comes to the point where we see that a change needs to happen, as much as I love Arteta, I would be the first to say maybe he does have to go. Yeah. I don't think we're there yet. But I do think this season might be the first kind of real key indicator of what's to come, because as we said before, because the competitiveness level is up another notch yet again. So how do we respond? If we fall even shorter than prior, then maybe that's another conversation by then, but we don't know it
yet. Yeah. And if we're still 6th or 7th in the league for XG over the course of the season, or if we are still one of the worst teams in the league at converting high turnovers into chances or shots on goal, right? Things like that. If we're suddenly one of the most open defenses in the league, yeah, those are things that you have to take a look at that suggest a trend that we don't want to be associated with. And that's when you start to have those conversations. But if we do what we did in 23-24, where we go 16-1-1 for the last 18 games of the season, and we finish 2 points behind the champions, it's frustrating, but we're playing really well. And I think people underestimate how difficult it is just to do that these days. So before we get out of here, as I mentioned at the top of the pod, we did a worst signings of all time bracket, right? Because it was kind of a question that's been rattling around in my head a little bit, and I thought it'd be interesting to see people's takes on it. So we do have the round of 16 going right now. If you go to the Not That Kind of Gooner Twitter page, which is at Not That Gooner, you will find the polls currently going on. Those run until Tuesday, I believe. So get in there a vote for the round of 16. Just a quick rundown of what happened in the round of 36. Inamoto beat out Lakanga. Neto beat out Marquinhos. Runarsson progressed past Park. Biscoff beat out Pepe, which Pepe then kind of really emphasized against us the other day. Denis Suarez progressed past Cedric. Andre Santos got past Jeffers into the round of 16. Sebastian Scilacci beat out Almunia. Czech beat out Stepanovs. Sterling progressed past
That's
Sagan.
crazy. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I genuinely...
Well, yeah, no, yeah, I want you to jump in here, yeah.
Yeah. I should have done it before this, but this is where I'll plant my flag. And there's no way you're telling me Igor Stepanovs was like that. Petr was worse than Igor Stepanov. There's no conceivable realm of possibilities. Yes, we did not get the prime Petr of Chelsea and run before that. I understand that. I think fans massively overstate his time with us in terms of how bad it was. I think that's absolutely insane.
I think Czech was okay.
That's
he
wasn't worse than Igor Stepanov. Can people name me 20 matches Igor Stepanov's played in for us? Genuinely, probably not. So the fact that that's the case tells me that it was such an inconsequential. Do you know what I mean?
Sorry, I meant Stepanov's got past Czech. Did I say that incorrectly?
Or maybe my head. Okay, this is a rant that maybe didn't have to happen. Okay, fine. We'll just X this out from all our brains because maybe I misheard you or maybe you misspoke. Either way, I'm glad that that's the case. Fine.
I will say I think Czech was just mid, right?
Sure.
But I think the thing with Czech is people hate on him because of the window he came in during.
Yes, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Which by the way, I still get mad about. I threw a fit at the end of that window when I realized that Czech was our only signing. But
that's fair. That's fair.
On the other side of the bracket, Sterling overcame Sagan. Silvestre beat out Matty Ryan. Willian beat out Richard Wright. Austin Trusty beat out Pablo Mari. I agree with that. I think people misunderstand the Austin Trusty signing, and I'll get to that in a second. Actually,
I agree with that. I understand the take already, but yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think people look at the Austin Trusty signing like we scouted him and said, oh yeah, that'd be a really great addition to our team. And then we signed him and we're like, oh no, he's not good enough. That's not what happened. We signed this guy from a Kroenke-owned MLS team and loaned him out to get him that exposure into European football. I mean, in a way, we are in a multi-club model. It's just a very fucking useless one because it's with an MLS club.
100% are in a multi-club model in that realm. Yeah. It's one we don't use because, as someone who unfortunately has to cover MLS regularly for work, there's not a lot of players that have come through the doors at Colorado that could ever hack it in the Premier League, let alone at Arsenal, right? So it was clearly a long-term kind of like internal decision to get him moved on. That's fine. Yeah, so I do agree with you that fans absolutely misunderstand that deal from top to bottom. So
yeah, it was a favor. It was a favor to the Kroenkes. That's what that signing was. So if he loses to Willian in this next round, I will actually be genuinely upset. Kim Kallstrom got past Yaya Sanogo. Shkodran Mustafi beat out William Gallas. Lichtsteiner progressed past Asano. And Senderos makes it to the round of 16 over Aladier. Is there anything there? Okay, so the answer is yes.
What? Man, there's got to be some revisions in that as well because, I mean, Philip Senderos was starting for us in Champions League in some big games and performing.
Yeah.
So, and Jeremy Aldier, I think for me, I would class Aladier as a failure, not because he was like demonstrably bad, but he never hit the heights that people thought when he was coming through the ranks in France.
Yeah.
People talked about Aladier in a way, not like Anelka or Henry level, but he was supposed to have a much better career than he actually did have. Vastly better. And he never did. And that's okay. Because sometimes things just don't work out, right?
Yeah.
But I like I said, Senderos was in our back line on big Champions League nights. Never looked out of place.
Wasn't he in the back four when we beat Real Madrid at the Bernabeu?
Yes! When we blanked Real Madrid, Senderos was in that 11. You know, playing against a Roma side that had like Francesco Totti in his pump. All these things, right? And Senderos never looked out of place. You could maybe argue that he lacked the overall consistency that you'd want to see. I think that's a fair suggestion.
Yeah.
But to say that he was worse than Jeremy Aldier, I think that's harsh. That is really. I also think a lot of fans maybe they don't even remember Jeremy Aldier. Also, a lot of fans might not even remember Philip Senderos because a lot of Arsenal fans, and this isn't a disrespectful thing because it's just a reality. Fan bases take over in generations, right? A lot of Arsenal fans now are quite young. You know, they're younger than you and I for sure. And I've been an Arsenal supporter since 1995. We won't talk about my age right now. So it's a long time. So I've seen like how things have gone, right? But I remember the way fans talked about Aladier and Senderos. I remember watching both of them like vividly, and I think that's harsh. But I'm not the one that voted, so it is what it is.
I was honestly loath to put Senderos in here in the first place, but just no one else got nominated that I would keep him out for. I do remember, though, someone nominated Johan Giroud, and I thought to myself when I saw that, I was like, no, like he was fine. Like he wasn't a catastrophe on the pitch every time I saw him. And Senderos is kind of I felt the same way about Senderos. Like you would put both those guys in a Premier League match, and like sometimes like they'd get beaten, and they clearly weren't. They were not the best we had at that time, but they were perfectly serviceable. So yeah, I think that's a bit of a weird one.
So I want to just before you move on to the next one, the choke I want people to remember Senderos started on a back four that included Toure, fine, right? Abue at right back, okay. Mathieu Flamini was playing left back, and I think Mathieu Flamini, for what he was, decent player, I think in midfield, he had quite a few moments for us that were top. He wasn't a left back. He was a makeshift left back, against a Real Madrid side that, if fans forget, had R9 up front, Zidane and Guti in midfield, Robinho, David Beckham, right?
The
and then
Galacticos.
Right. And then you had Roberto Carlos, obviously on the other flank. That's fun. You had, Sergio Ramos in that team. Thomas Gravesen started at 6. Casillas was there. Yeah, this is like one of those Real Madrid teams where people look back and you had other players off the bench. You had Antonio Cassano when he was still thought of as the second coming of Christ in the Italian camp. You had Raul coming off the bench, Julio Baptista, and when he was at Real Madrid, he wasn't necessarily a bad player. And we kept a clean sheet in the Bernabeu with Philip Senderos putting in a 90-minute shift. So I just think that's crazy to me. But we can move on.
I think there's only really one other bracket or one other matchup here that I think is worth talking about, and that's the Gallas Mustafi one, early round heavyweight clash.
That's fair.
Mustafi got through, and I don't think that's ridiculous. But I just think, I don't know, William Gallas rubbed me the wrong way, to be quite honest.
It reminds me of one of those March Madness brackets where it's 8 versus 9, and then either one of those teams, they're so even, it doesn't really matter who goes through. Because that's kind of how I view that. I feel like both of them probably should be in the next round anyway, so I don't have much to say about it. I feel like if it was reversed, I'd agree with it still, because probably for different reasons, but I do feel like I have no issues with that. I think that's fair.
I think Mustafi, for the price that we paid for him and how dreadful he was, that's probably about right. But the way I look at Gallas is, this is a guy that we effectively traded Ashley Cole for. And I know Ashley Cole wanted to leave, right? So it's not like it would have been easy for us to choose not to do this. But we effectively traded Ashley Cole for him, and we gave him the number 10 shirt, which I always thought was an atrocity.
Yeah, 100%.
And we made him captain of the club.
Yep.
And this guy rewarded us by just, talking shit about players publicly with the armband on. That moment at Birmingham City where he just sat there on the pitch and, threw his little tantrum instead of kind of showing some leadership and trying to console his teammates. And now he's a, C-list pundit who occasionally takes these weird jabs at us. And I just what a waste. And so, again, Mustafi, I probably would have voted for Mustafi too on another day, but I just want to say what a fucking bad signing William Gallas turned out to be.
But I think contextually, you could understand why I would probably vote for William Gallas in that position. And I used to be one of those, and throw whatever shame, make me do the Cersei Lannister walk. Okay. But I used to try to find ways to defend Mustafi. And I do think, because I think there were those odd times where he actually did defend well, when you were like, okay, can we just see more of that from him? And then it never happened, ever. And I feel like that was the frustration with him, because then he would follow that up with an astronomically horrendous performance for 4 match days in a row.
Yeah.
But when it comes to William Gallas, I feel like he was such a stain on the shirt, and that might seem weird. That might seem weird to say, but he was such a blight on the on the senior side, on the club in general, on the fans. He is to this day. I have a visceral hatred for him that I don't have. Mustafi was just a bad overall player. William Gallas is a complete POS in every sense of the word, beyond how he performed on the pitch. I think that's why, for me, I would probably vote for him over Mustafi.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. Where Mustafi was a bad signing and a terrible player, which is a shame, because Mustafi kind of on paper I think he had the physical attributes to be a really good center back. It's just that he had the mental fortitude of wet toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly.
That guy crumbled every time things got remotely difficult.
Yeah.
But Gallus is a stain on the club.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put that. Well, okay. Well, next week we will talk about the round of 16 results and talk about who gets through, whether or not we agree with those takes and things along those natures. So we'll see how that goes. We'll put a bow on it here, but thanks so much for being here with us. I know that preseason hasn't been the goal fest that we wanted it to be, but I feel better after talking about this. Hopefully you do too.
That's what I'm here for. The big bucks is to cheer you up.
Yeah.
It's my entire existence summed up.
Oh, man. Your check's in the mail.
Excellent. There'll be better coffee than what you fucking drink, so it's fine.
It's just the one time. I go to local places. I'm actually going to go to a Palestinian place I love because it's Friday tomorrow. But I just wanted some caffeine, and it was 20 feet away. I know, big mistake. But although Starbucks, if you ever do want to sponsor the pod, let us know.
Sure.
Yeah, but so we'll be back on Tuesday. We've got a great episode with a great guest that I'm really excited about. So we'll be doing that on Tuesday, and then hopefully the three of us will be back later on next week to do a predictions episode ahead of the start of the actual season. So looking forward to that as well. Until then, take care, and just try to stay sane. It's a long season. If you burn yourself out emotionally before match week 1, it's not going to be fun. So just take some breaths. It's going to be okay. Get some coffee that's not from Starbucks. Go for a walk. We're all in this together. But we'll be back with you on Tuesday. Until then, get your mind out of the gunner, and we will talk to you soon. So, bye. Bye.
Tries well.